What if the Sumerian Anunnaki breathed life into the demons of the primeval storm, wind, and untamed wilderness to balance the ancient cosmos, to act as a counterweight to their own celestial harmony? Long before the dawn of mankind, before the first traces of civilization rose from the rolling plains of ancient Sumeria, primordial entities known as the Seven Demons are said to have held sway over the earth. This shadowy legacy still echoes through the deepest folds of our collective history, preserved on the weathered clay remnants of ancient texts such as the Enumar Anu Enlil and the Epic of Era and Isham, among others. These silent cuneiform inscriptions carry us back to a cosmos that was still learning the geometry of its own glimmering stars, a forgotten era where the great Anunnaki gods first gathered to shape the foundations of the universe and fashion humanity from the sacred soil of the earth. The underlying nature of these fierce entities is revealed in ancient Mesopotamian mythology as forces said to be born not of mere mortal malice, but of the raw and wild breath of the universe itself. They were of a time before the gods had fully learned to tame the shadows of our primordial world. Here the threads of Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian traditions all intertwine, revealing a timeless chronicle of the Sebitti, those seven ferocious storm demons who dared to challenge the highest gods for control of the very architecture of the heavens. The vast glittering expanse of the night sky illuminates a profound duality older than time, revealing how a universe governed by such comprehensive mathematical order could also harbor these forces of absolutely unbridled chaos within its starlit depths. It is a haunting polarity that rests at the very core of primeval cosmology, reminding early stargazers that even the most perfect celestial creations cast long and deeply unpredictable shadows. These swirling vortexes of dark energy possessed a raging and untamed power, emitting a brutal resonance which even the fiercest of the divine celestial council was said to have feared. The luminous shrines of the celestial realm functioned upon strictly harmonious rules, yet the earthly world below remained bound to the volatile friction of natural extremes. This delicate tension between peace and ruin dictated the slow turning of the planetary spheres, weaving both brilliant light and heavy darkness into the grand eternal tapestry of early existence. Unlike the deeply revered and benevolent Apkallu sages, who would later emerge gracefully from the sweet freshwater abyss to teach mankind the arts of civilization, these dark entities possessed a vastly different purpose. They were not created to carry the holy May down to the muddy riverbanks or help build the towering mud-brick temples of the early human settlements. Instead, these unseen creatures were manifested to act as the raw forces of the untamed wilderness itself, breathing unpredictable life into the barren plains, while the wise fish-cloaked counselors brought forth brilliant logic to guide early humans toward a beautiful agricultural prosperity. The seven storm demons brought only the howling and unpredictable fury of the rushing winds, intent on sweeping away the carefully organized boundaries of the earthly realm. Long before the later Babylonian empires began to whisper the name of the Sebitti into the evening winds, the earliest populations knew them by a much older and far more mysterious title. Ancient Sumerian texts refer to this dark group of tempests simply as the Iminbi, a title which translates simply to those seven. They were entirely invisible to the mortal eye, lacking any physical form or defined shape that a human mind could ever possibly comprehend. Early priests would later come to understand that the existence of the Iminbi was not an unfortunate mistake of creation, but rather a highly deliberate and necessary natural counterweight to the supreme order of the Anunnaki gods. the universe required the friction of the storm to continually test the strength of its own foundations. They were the ultimate balancing mechanism of the cosmos, ensuring that the long-turning ages of the world would never become completely still. For without darkness, what is light? If you are listening to this in the still quiet of the night, let us know where and when you are joining us from in the comments section. It is quietly comforting to realize that countless listeners, scattered across distant lands and different time zones, are all settling into the same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes of human history. And if you are enjoying this Sumerian history for sleep narrative, finding it helps you relax or even drift off, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support our efforts to keep bringing you these ancient stories each week, and continue reaching others who are searching for the same calm place to relax and unwind. If you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now let us return to those days long past when the supreme gods kept watch over a shifting cosmos, a realm where even the most majestic and powerful deities of the celestial assembly respected the necessary existence of these volatile energies. By allowing the 7 demons to exist within the outer fringes of the known world, their restlessly wandering spirits brought the necessary tension required to drive the turning ages forward, acting as the fierce and unbridled breath of the primordial wilderness itself. Yet their volatile essence did not simply erupt from the void, but rather it was said to have been forged in a crucible far more intimate and far more staggering than the sheer emptiness of the cosmos. In the deep shadow of the primeval pantheon, 2 entities of unparalleled sovereignty, whose very names form the bedrock of all creation, intertwined their power in a singular cataclysmic act of genesis, forever altering the celestial architecture of the heavens. During this time, long before the fragile lungs of mankind ever drew their first breath, the vast terrestrial plains of the earth rested in a state of absolute, unblinking silence. Some of the earliest Sumerian traditions recorded within the ancient Odughul, or evil demon incantations, reveal a universe still volatile and deeply unsettled. In this desolate primeval epoch, the supreme deities were only just beginning to assert their dominance over the raw elements of creation. The highest reaches of the shimmering celestial vault were commanded by a supreme sky god, known to ancient priests simply as An. Below his luminous domain rested the vastly sprawling body of the earth goddess, whispered of in early clay records as Ki. These 2 monumental forces of nature served as the absolute stronghold of our cosmos, beautifully reflecting the ultimate duality of the farthest heights of the heavenly realm above and the lowest depths of the fertile earth below. Many other benevolent deities, who would later come to guide civilization, were born from the gentle and nurturing embrace of a mother goddess. But the 7 dark tempests, known as the Iminbi, possessed a vastly different and far more terrifying origin story. They were not formed with great compassion or delicate care, but were instead ripped into existence through a violently turbulent cosmic event. Ancient texts describe a profound moment when the highest skies descended heavily upon the dark and raw soil of a barren world. The supreme sky god sowed his celestial seed directly into the cool ground, creating an explosive union between the limitless heavens above and the unyielding ground below. This monumental clash of opposing cosmic forces fractured the pristine silence of the early plains, birthing a new form of raw energy from their cosmic embrace. 7 dark entities sprang forth from this violent mingling of earth and sky, erupting from the muddy surfaces, like sudden bursts of a raging tempest. They were, in essence, the terrifying offspring of pure atmospheric friction, inheriting both the towering height of their father and the heavy, unforgiving density of their mother. The very soil of our world shuddered under such immense weight of their awakening, forever altering the tranquil balance of that formative landscape. Unlike the beautifully structured forms of the divine pantheon above, these earliest Sumerian depictions describe the Iminbi as completely and utterly formless, perceiving them as invisible sweeping storm winds wandering aimlessly across a desolate and empty wasteland. Lacking any defined physical shape that human minds could ever possibly comprehend, they existed solely as pure and untamed forces of sheer atmospheric volatility, shadows pooled together in the deeply unformed valleys as these phantom tempests roamed our earth, howling with an intense and unbridled resonance. With them they carried the freezing bite of winter gales and the scorching heat of arid southern deserts, shifting their invisible mass with the changing tides of weather. Early stargazers would observe them only through the devastating wake they left behind, sensing their heavy presence whenever calm skies suddenly turned dark. This formless existence of wandering storms was a deliberate manifestation of raw forces from an untamed wilderness, providing a necessary and natural counterweight to the supreme order being established in the high luminous shrines of the celestial court above. They scoured the empty world as invisible guardians of chaos. Their ancient landscape was entirely devoid of towering ziggurats or sweeping canals, leaving only a vast expanse of cracked earth and tangled marshland. Without any sprawling cities to impede their path, the seven demons surged across the boundless expanses of primeval continents with an overwhelming and terrifying speed. Howling voices echoed through empty mountain canyons, carrying the raw and untamed breath of a universe still searching for its final form. Calmly flowing rivers of sweet water would suddenly churn into frothing torrents whenever these invisible entities glided over their glassy surfaces. The thick scent of crushed reeds and churning mud followed their every erratic movement, emanating a heavy atmosphere of impending ruin. It was a time of beautifully terrifying extremes, where the quiet serenity of a sleeping earth was constantly broken by repetitive sudden bursts of uncompromising celestial power. The supreme Anunnaki creators watched these roaming shadows from their distant and peaceful celestial sanctuaries. They recognized that the volatile energy of their offspring served a vital purpose within the broader architecture of our ancient world. Continuous atmospheric friction carved deep valleys and swept away stagnant waters, preparing the rugged terrain for an eventual arrival of mortal caretakers. These unseen entities rapidly swept across the vast Mesopotamian plains with unbelievable velocity, their volatile spirits fueled by a restless energy that knew no bounds. They possessed no thrones in the highest of heavens, nor did they hold any sacred temples to anchor them to the damp riverbanks. Their entire primeval existence was defined by constant howling movement, forever chasing the endless horizons of an unpopulated earth. The cool, salt-tinged breath of southern marshes would suddenly whip into a raging frenzy as they passed. Rising dust from the dry earth spiraled violently through the air, painting an open sky with the choking haze of rising storms. Yet when chaotic tempests would finally move onward, they left behind a heavy stillness that felt even deeper than before. For countless ages these seven magnificent storms wandered a desolate earth without any conceivable form, known only by the terrifying sounds of their rushing winds. The supreme gods continued to watch their ferocious offspring tear across the lower plains, recognizing a need to harness this incredible and untamed power. As the eons passed by, and our cosmos slowly prepared for the distant arrival of mortal life, the highest authority of the heavens would reshape each of these violent creatures with new majestic forms. The supreme sky god An descended into the howling darkness of the earthly realm. He stood majestically before his ferocious creations, his radiant presence piercing through the swirling dust of the barren plains to halt their erratic movements. Out of the howling tempests, the chaotic winds began to slowly gather together before their father, ready to receive the terrifying physical shapes they would come to bear for all eternity. Centuries would pass before later Babylonian scribes could fully articulate this extraordinary transformation within their weathered earthen archives. Ancient clay tablets containing the legendary epic of Era and Ishum record this profound moment of celestial intervention, detailing how these formless tempests finally received their ultimate, and perhaps even more terrifying physical identities. An gazed deeply into the howling center of the primeval storm, preparing to permanently bind their chaotic essence into solid flesh and hardened bone. Until now, the earliest human populations knew these entities only as the invisible Iminbi, but shifting tides of time eventually demanded a more distinguishable face for these wild forces of nature. Through the spoken decrees of their divine father, these wandering shadows were reborn as the terrifying Sebitti, stepping out from formless winds to claim highly specific and devastating destinies. The radiant sky god raised his hand over the churning dust, silencing the endless howling of the barren land with a single commanding gesture. Approaching the first of the 7 swirling shadows, he reached into the very core of the violent tempest to carefully mold its new earthly vessel. A heavy atmosphere of absolute dread washed across the quiet plains as the very first demon was granted a deeply paralyzing and inescapable aura. The entity was entirely stripped of its invisible nature, manifesting quickly as a towering figure of pure and unadulterated terror. An commanded this newly formed creation to roam the vast Mesopotamian landscape, spreading a suffocating wave of absolute fear wherever its heavy footsteps happened to fall. Its terrifying presence was meticulously designed to freeze the beating hearts of both mortal men and divine beasts alike, acting as the ultimate vanguard of sudden and overwhelming panic. Moving slowly along this line of shadowy beings, the Supreme Creator turned his blinding gaze toward the second chaotic mass of untamed energy. Its formless winds instantly ignited under his celestial authority, bursting into a brilliant pillar of scorching cosmic fire. The raw essence of this second demon had been permanently bound to the unquenchable heat of the deep universe, granting it the devastating power of absolute incineration. This blazing entity possessed an all-consuming arid heat that far exceeded the gentle life-giving rays of the golden morning sun. It embodied the relentless friction of the untamed wilderness, capable of reducing the most fertile of river valleys into blackened fields of cracked clay. This second demon was specifically directed to unleash his endless drought upon the terrestrial realm, acting as a fiery weapon whenever the perfect balance of our cosmos demanded a severe and natural correction. The Divine Father then stepped before the third swirling shadow, preparing to bestow what may have been the most visually striking transformation of the entire primeval assembly. As his majestic hands forcefully sculpted those turbulent atmospheric currents, a ferocious physical shape began to slowly solidify within the choking dust of the open plains. Later, Babylonian scholars meticulously recorded that this third demonic entity was explicitly given the roaring face and incredibly fierce and intimidating lion. This highly specific physical manifestation provided a brilliant contrast against their much older and entirely invisible Sumerian origins. Ancient priests had finally given a visual face to the absolute chaos of the natural world, permanently transforming this phantom wind into a highly tangible beast of destruction. The gaping maw of this lion-headed demon dripped with an insatiable hunger, ready to devour any lingering illusion of safety within the earthly realm. Its massive jaws were fashioned to mimic the terrifying predators that prowled the deep shadows of high mountain passes. An decreed that this third creation would carry the brutal resonance of a hunting beast, its deafening roar fully capable of shaking the deepest foundations of the earth. The mere sight of its golden mane and razor-sharp fangs served as a permanent reminder that the untamed wilderness would never truly be conquered or completely tamed. The sheer physical weight of this feline entity pressed heavily against the yielding river mud, leaving deep footprints embedded in the dark soil. It possessed a predatory grace that perfectly mirrored the slow and silent journey of celestial bodies drifting high above. This lion-faced weapon of the sky breathed a predatory wind across the empty terrain, its volatile spirit already yearning for the distant friction of human civilization. A paralyzing aura of fear mingled seamlessly with the suffocating heat of cosmic fire, while the low growl of the lion-faced demon echoed softly across the darkening horizon. The great Anunnaki god observed his majestic handiwork with a chilling satisfaction, knowing that these entities would serve as the ultimate challengers to any eroding dangers of future complacency. Yet this grand celestial ceremony was far from complete, as 4 remaining tempests continued to swirl restlessly upon the dusty and uneven ground. They waited in acquiescence for their divine father to carve their destinies from the raw fabric of our universe. The silent earth braced itself for a terrifying awakening of the final 4 forces of the Sebitti. A quiet stillness returned to those barren plains as An focused his radiant attention upon that next swirling shadow, awaiting readily for his new form. He now plunged his divine hands into the very core of this 4th phantom. Its swirling atmospheric currents instantly surrendered to his supreme will, taking the shape of a new and overwhelming earthly embodiment. The 4th tempest was suddenly pulled downward by an immense gravitational weight, forming a towering terrestrial giant. Granted the staggering physical strength to flatten even the tallest stone peaks of the distant mountains, this brutal entity commanded the very horizon. Beneath its immense footsteps, the deepest subterranean bedrock shattered, acting as a devastating but natural counterbalance to the quiet endurance of the material realm. As a hulking manifestation of pure physical force, it seemed to emerge from a world which was still occasionally convulsing under its own enormous pressure. Standing firmly upon the dark soil, this 4th weapon possessed thick muscles that were dense enough to crush any solid barrier attempting to block its path. A terrifyingly slow violence was thus brought to the expanding arsenal of the Sebitti, serving as a reminder that even the most majestic peaks could easily crumble into dust. Then a 5th chaotic shadow was quickly summoned forward, preparing to receive a vastly different essence, one which more strongly echoed their primordial origins. The Divine Father commanded this swirling wind to take the horrifying shape of a rushing tempest, howling endlessly across the wide Mesopotamian valleys. It perfectly embodied the deafening shriek of sudden winter storms, carrying a biting chill from the deepest wilderness directly into the fragile hearts of early human settlements. This howling 5th entity moved swiftly with an erratic momentum, easily capable of stripping the fertile riverbanks of their beautiful green harvests. Untamed atmospheric rage was flawlessly distilled into its violent core. It roared alongside its newly formed siblings with blinding speed, elevating the foreboding force of a darkening sky into their primeval enclave. Moving toward the sixth swirling mass of darkness, An bestowed a deeply unique destiny upon its shifting form. This particular demon was strictly instructed to strike its targets from both those highest luminous heavens and the lowest subterranean depths simultaneously. Such a terrifying dual nature allowed it to entirely bypass any heavy mud-brick fortifications, completely surrounding its victims from every conceivable angle, leaving no room for escape. Naturally, the ancient populations feared this sixth demon deeply, knowing that its overwhelming assault was utterly unavoidable. There was absolutely no physical sanctuary that could be kept safe, not from a weapon that could crash down from all possible directions. It represented the absolute totality of universal ruin, bridging the darkest corners of the silent underworld with the blistering heights of our upper skies. Now only a final lingering shadow remained, as our supreme creator molded this seventh figure into a towering warrior. He replaced the warmth of its otherworldly blood with deadly serpentine venom. This terrifying biological alteration created a brilliant earthly parallel to those ancient and ferocious dragons, creatures said to be lurking deep within our primordial oceans. A potently toxic essence pulsed rhythmically through its dark veins, radiating a sickening aura that withered the delicate marsh reeds resting beneath its heavy feet. Where the other demonic entities brought roaring winds, searing heat, and crushing strength, this venomous seventh demon personified the dangerous perils lurking beyond, evil forces of corruption that lie patiently waiting in the shadowed corners of the ancient world. Its lethality was just as silent and deeply penetrating as the serpentine creature whose deadly poison circulated throughout its body, ensuring that the arsenal of the gods now possessed every possible method of earthly devastation. The seven fearsome weapons now stood shoulder to shoulder, fully awakened to their horrifying physical destinies. An gazed down upon his assembled terrors, a silent architect finding grim stillness in the completed cemetery of ruin. He slowly ascended back into his luminous celestial shrines, leaving these newly formed Sebitti to wander across an empty terrestrial expanse. Although they possessed immense physical power, these dark offspring were granted no specific thrones or grand temples to anchor their turbulent spirits. Even in their earliest primordial forms, long before their tangible manifestations were molded into shape, a restless and bitter energy began to simmer within their inherently devious minds, growing heavier and heavier as they roamed the silent Mesopotamian plains. Their predatory gaze would turn upward into that velvet darkness of the night sky, engrossed in the underlying currents of envy that were slowly brewing round them, as they watched a gentle cyclical turning of glittering stars above. The flawless geometry of those celestial bodies offered a stark contrast to their own chaotic earthly existence. The seven demons realized that the permanent domains held by the highest authorities allowed them to enjoy incredible beauty and tremendous power. A growing resentment that would soon fester into a terrifying rebellion, driving these storm demons to launch a direct assault against those brightest guardians of the night. The ancient celestial balance which so carefully cradled the Sumerian landscape relied upon three magnificent guardians to maintain a perfect and enduring harmony. This luminous triad consisted of the gentle moon god Nanna, the brilliant sun god Utu, and the dazzling morning star known as Nanna, whose bright light twinkled in the glimmering form of the star Venus. They shared the heavens with an effortless grace, bringing a soothing comfort to the resting earth. Left to roam within the darkest of shadows, the 7 demons felt the agonizing sting of exclusion. This simmering jealousy twisted their formless winds into a unified desire to permanently disrupt the peaceful equilibrium of the waking world. These 3 powerful deities held absolute, highly revered domains over the orderly functions of our vast universe. Their brilliance cast a pure light intended to banish the creeping dangers of the untamed wilderness. Their flawless celestial rotation stood in direct opposition to the dark and inherently turbulent nature of those wandering storm demons. From their lofty and shimmering thrones, the gods peacefully governed the gentle flow of time and the slow shifting of agricultural seasons. This careful administration ensured that the fertile river valleys would continuously yield their bountiful harvests to mortal laborers. Under their watch, a predictable and soothing rhythm was cast down upon the vast terrestrial realm. Mortal populations were now actively thriving within newly established mud-brick cities which sprawled out far below the celestial courts. Human caretakers worked diligently during the sunlit hours to maintain the sweeping canals and the towering temple platforms. They relied entirely upon the steady light of this divine triad to push back the terrifying boundaries of the unknown. As volatile creatures born of the howling and untamed plains, the Sebitti despised any light that dared to pierce through their nocturnal domain. Their devious attention turned harshly toward the gentle moon god Nanna. He was deeply resented for daring to cast his pale silvery illumination across the silent terrain during the deepest hours of the night. Within that comforting glow rested a reassuring beacon for the sleeping world, a soft tapestry of light that actively worked to dissolve the absolute terror that the storm demons sought so desperately to inspire. Thus, an effort to extinguish this luminous guardian, and thereby plunge the earth back into an eternity of darkness, became the singular, all-consuming purpose of their impending cosmic assault. A coordinated campaign born in the dark to strike at the silver heart of the heavens. By targeting the moon, they intended to completely sever the delicate and luminous tether that connected the heavy earth to the shining heavens. They understood that the night sky was the most vulnerable phase of the cosmic cycle, offering a perfect canvas for their shadow to consume everything in their wake. A sudden extinguishing of the lunar radiance would plunge the mortal populations into a state of absolute and suffocating panic, which fed their demonic souls. Far below this brewing rebellion rested the peaceful and ancient settlement of Eridu, located quietly at the edge of the southern marshes. As one of the oldest cities ever known to mankind, it functioned as a pristine sanctuary of early earthly devotion and agricultural prosperity. Its heavy mud-brick walls and high temple platforms rested safely under the gentle and protective blanket of the moonlight. Mortals slept soundly within their woven reed huts, entirely unaware of the terrifying cosmic assault gathering just above their dreaming heads. Sweet breezes swept slowly across the calm southern waters, bringing a refreshing chill to the resting caretakers after a long day of toil. The entire terrestrial realm was lulled into a deep and vulnerable slumber by the tranquil turning of the glittering stars above. The sprawling city of Eridu hummed with a quiet and rhythmic breathing that perfectly matched the slowly turning seasons. Its towering sanctuaries stood as staggering monuments to the supreme creators who had so generously bestowed the arts of civilization through the generosity of the 7 sages. Not a single mortal mind could have possibly anticipated the sudden shift that violently ruptured their carefully ordered existence. High above the sleeping delta, the seven demons began to slowly draw their devastating powers together into one unified front. They wove their paralyzing fear, scorching cosmic fire, ferocious winds, and undeniable strength into a single massive vortex of living shadows. Their venomous energy pulsed with a terrifying synchronicity, readying themselves to unravel the pristine tapestry of the night and consume the vivid glow of the upper realms. They intended to plunge the orderly universe back into a state of absolute primordial darkness, where their raw power could reign supreme above all others. By shattering this gentle anchor of the night, they hoped to finally usurp cosmic control from the highest and most luminous of divine creators. But the heavens would not have to fight this desperate battle entirely alone. A profound and ancient magic was already beginning to stir within the deepest subterranean waters of the sleeping earth. The wise water god Enki sensed the gathering shadows and quietly prepared to lend his vast aquatic wisdom to the defense of the sky. Sourced directly from the hidden freshwater ocean known as the Apsu, this esoteric magic carried an incredibly potent and restorative energy. Enki prepared to bestow this pure power upon his brilliant son, Asalluhi, later associated with the radiant figure Marduk, ensuring the heavens possessed a formidable champion of their own. This young and capable deity of incantations would soon be called upon to shatter the suffocating grip of the coming darkness. This powerful aquatic defense would also be shared directly with a highly dedicated class of earthly exorcist priests, known as the Ashipu. These devoted mortal scholars were trained to perfectly translate the protective magic of the deep into spoken words of immense power. The harmonious connection between the divine creators and their earthly caretakers was about to be tested by an unimaginable celestial violence. As the Seven Sebitti moved stealthily across the starry vault, the pale silver glow of the moon would come to waver in a catastrophic confrontation that would temporarily plunge the world into the very darkness in which these dark forces thrived. Etched deeply within the hardened clay of the Otuku Lamnutu, or Evil Demon's incantation texts, echoes of this first violent attempt to usurp supreme authority are carefully recorded in mysterious cuneiform inscriptions. This revered manuscript was utilized by ancient priests to ward off those dark forces believed to cause earthly illness, terrestrial misfortune, and profound cosmic disturbances. Disturbances that would soon take terrifying shape across the star-speckled canopy of the night sky, as those seven swirling vortexes of chaotic energy grew increasingly hungry for absolute dominion over the natural world. Hurling themselves across the celestial vault with a blinding and terrifying speed, they surged directly toward the luminous domain of the gentle moon god, Nanna, intent on swallowing his glowing radiance entirely within their expanding shadowy forms. Our beautifully ordered universe braced itself for a monumental collision between the pristine light of the heavens and the ferocious breath of the savage wilds. These seven formless storm demons launched a carefully orchestrated brutal assault upon the solitary guardian of the night. They wrapped their freezing winds tightly around his silvery presence, creating a suffocating barrier that blocked even the smallest traces of illumination from reaching the fragile world below. The comforting beacon that had safely guided the sleeping earthly caretakers began to slowly succumb to a creeping and highly unnatural darkness. Ancient stargazers watched in absolute horror as the terrifying sight of a lunar eclipse unfolded directly above their resting cities. The dark and deadly forms of the Sebitti seemed to aggressively consume every glimmer of light, turning the once familiar glowing orb into an unrecognizable void. This heavy shadow crept methodically across the bright lunar surface, devouring the radiant silver light piece by piece, until absolutely nothing remained but a pitch-black expanse. Without the protective glow of the moon, the vast Mesopotamian landscape fell instantly into a state of terrifying isolation. Towering temple platforms of the earthly settlements vanished completely into the obscuring night, leaving the mortal population shivering in the sudden cold absence of their lunar guardian. The once peaceful rivers perfectly mirrored the suffocating darkness of the sky above, their sweet waters running completely black under the heavy weight of the demonic siege. Because the lunar cycles so heavily dictated the careful turning of the agricultural seasons, this cosmic obstruction caused the very measurement of time itself to suddenly grind to a halt. The predictable rhythm of human existence was violently severed, plunging the terrestrial planes back into an overwhelming state of primeval panic. The carefully structured harmony of the mortal world was entirely suspended, held hopelessly hostage by the ravenous appetite of those fierce tempests. It was a deeply catastrophic moment, where the grand turning architecture of the universe seemed to fracture under the sheer pressure of such overwhelming anarchy. The seven demons revelled loudly in the terrifying darkness which they had brought forth, believing their coordinated ambush had permanently extinguished the heavenly anchor. But the highest authorities of the divine assembly would not simply allow their flawless cosmic design to be dismantled by these wandering shadows without a tremendous fight. Far beneath the panic-stricken terrestrial surface, the wise water god Enki bore silent witness to this disastrous celestial rupture. He rested within the cool and tranquil currents of the Apsu, peering through the deep subterranean waters to closely observe the chaotic siege unfolding high above. This master architect of life, he who had so carefully ushered the first breath of mankind, immediately recognized that the delicate balance of creation required a swift and powerful intervention to restore the fading equilibrium. The great water deity gathered the most pure and soothing aquatic magic of his submerged domain, concentrating its ancient restorative energy into a singular and brilliant focus. He understood perfectly well that raw physical force alone could never untangle the suffocating grip of the storm demons. Only a more highly elevated intellectual power could shatter their dark hold. Summoning his brilliant son Asalluhi to his side, Enki prepared to unleash his ultimate weapon against the mindless fury of the Sebitti. This young and highly capable deity served as the supreme god of magic, perfectly suited to wield the esoteric incantations of the deep. Enki bestowed his vast aquatic wisdom directly upon his son, charging him with the monumental task of breaking the demonic blockade and restoring the lunar light to the world. Carrying the deepest, profound secrets of the primordial oceans, Asalluhi ascended rapidly from the sweet waters to confront the thick shadows still choking the heavens. He arrived bravely before the suffocated moon god, armed only with the rhythmic and commanding power of the spoken word. The determined god began to boldly recite those incredibly powerful incantations, projecting a wave of pure logic directly into the chaotic heart of the swirling tempest. His soothing voice carried the purifying resonance of the deep sea, cutting cleanly through the deafening howl of the chaotic winds. These divine syllables acted as an invisible and uncompromising wedge, driving themselves forcefully between the suffocating demons and their luminous captive. The intricately structured mathematics of the incantations violently clashed with the raw and formless energy of the untamed storms. Asalluhi commanded the wild forces to release their hostage, weaving his aquatic magic into an impenetrable shield around the fading lunar sphere. Unable to withstand the crushing weight of such supreme divine reasoning, the Seven Sebitti finally broke their tight formation. Their paralyzing grip was completely shattered by the flawless geometry of powerful esoteric incantations, forcing the dark shadows to recoil in bitter defeat. The volatile winds were stripped entirely of their suffocating density, scattering across the outer edges of the night sky. With the chaotic siege finally broken, the gentle silvery light of Nanna poured freely back into the velvety darkness. The ancient universe exhaled a collective breath of relief as the reassuring lunar glow returned to softly wash over the sleeping terrestrial plains. The quiet wisdom of the deep abyss remained safely held within the careful hands of dedicated earthly priests, whose voices murmured the ancient words of protection required to ward off future challenges. Tending to the sacred temple fires, where the air was thick with the scent of burning incense, these silent guardians watched the night sky with a deep and patient admiration, charting the rhythmic movements of the heavens in an attempt to discern exactly when these fierce entities might rise again. Displaced by such radiant purity, those scattered shadows quickly drifted away from the glowing lunar sphere, gracefully retreating upward into the deepest holds of the celestial vault. Their suffocating density dissolved gently into the cool night air, surrendering the terrestrial realm to a glowing brilliance that washed over the land in a soft, restorative tide. Rising high above the sleeping agricultural settlements, the seven demons returned to their rightful ancient domain within the highest reaches of the cosmos. They settled peacefully into the velvet darkness of the upper atmosphere, entering a deeply tranquil and suspended state of rest. The Supreme Creators allowed these wandering spirits to wait patiently among the distant galaxies, knowing that the slowly turning wheel of time would eventually require their chaotic friction. A deeply reassuring sensation of serenity descended upon the winding river valleys, as the natural equilibrium of the universe was beautifully restored. The volatile winds of the Sebitti quieted into a gentle breeze that rustled the tall green reeds along the muddy banks. The entire earthly realm exhaled a collective sigh of relief, watching the familiar and comforting glow of the stars return to the open skies high above. Generations of early stargazers stepped softly onto their high temple platforms, observing this lingering celestial presence hovering in the quiet dark. They sought to understand the resting cosmic forms of those seven entities, hoping to meticulously map their permanent location within the grand architecture of the heavens. By tracking the slow and majestic rotation of the celestial canopy, dedicated priests discovered a highly specific and glittering cluster of stars where the storm demons were said to reside throughout eternity. Ancient Babylonian astronomers would carefully chart this exact grouping of distant lights, pressing their detailed observations into heavy earthen archives. These patient scholars captured the shifting pathways of the universe upon a legendary collection of clay tablets, known widely as the Mula Pin. Within these deeply revered records, the resting place of these unruly shadows was perfectly translated into a highly predictable and mathematically flawless celestial coordinate, transforming a terrifying primeval memory into a readable map of divine intelligence. This remarkable celestial cartography brought an immense psychological comfort to the sprawling mud-brick cities resting safely far below. Finding the exact resting place of the storm demons proved that even the most unpredictable forces of the universe were firmly anchored to the flawless rotation of the great cosmic design. Ancient scribes documented this incredibly tight grouping of stars under the humble and poetic title of Mulmul, a name which translates simply as the stars. We now know this magnificent astronomical formation as the Pleiades, a shimmering constellation that has captured the dreaming minds of humanity for countless passing ages. To the early populations of Mesopotamia, this brilliant cluster represented the physical embodiment of the seven magnificent tempests. The first cities of the primeval world learned to operate in flawless synchronization with the quiet and eternal glow of these starry guardians. The steady rising of this constellation marked the slow turning of the seasons, guiding the cyclical harvests with ensured mathematical precision. The winding canals of refreshing sweet waters mirrored the shimmering reflection of these seven celestial markers, pulling their distant magic directly into the fertile soil. When early laborers looked up from the damp river silt, they perceived this beautiful gathering of light to be a watchful and necessary enclave, suspended perfectly in the silently flickering tapestry of the night. The brilliantly twinkling stars served as a permanent reminder of the delicate balance between the pristine order of the heavens and the untamed energy of the outermost fringes of otherworldly realms. It offered a breathtaking visual anchor for the tired caretakers of the lower planes. The soft radiance of Mul spread a deeply comforting and protective aura across the vast expanses of the rolling marshlands and arid desert plains. It was a clear and reassuring sign that the supreme deities were constantly maintaining the delicate fabric of their reality, keeping the ever-changing breath of the cosmos safely contained within a beautiful boundary of light. As the heavy shadows of midnight stretch lazily across the sleeping world, we find ourselves drifting into the deepest folds of our shared history. We can safely surrender our consciousness into the quiet suspension of these distant stars, where a history which has yet to be fully explained lies hidden, echoing gently within the stillness of the night. More profound mysteries lie waiting in the farthest reaches of our collective memory, ready to unfold when the time is right. But for now, the tempests of old have quieted into a rhythmic celestial pause, their brilliant light serving as a persistent guide through the vast eras of human progress. The very pulse of the universe beats in slow and perfect harmony, grounding us in the quiet certainty that all is held in balance. Our eyelids grow heavy and slowly close over dreaming eyes, knowing that we are merely guests in this vast, shimmering theatre, cradled by the same timeless glow that has guided countless dreamers since the dawn of time. In this restorative stillness, sunset dissolves into stardust. Those flickering lights within the celestial canopy hum with a resonant lullaby, a subtle reminder that we are all a part of this grand everlasting cycle. They continue their majestic rotation, watching over the dreaming world with a calm and eternal poise, ensuring the perpetual memory of an age-old story that remains forever present, waiting patiently for the dawn of a new age.